That was slow. Welcome to Set Up, you guys. Wow. Welcome to Set Up. I guess I'm done with Set Up. Um, Welcome to my channel, you guys. I am sober. I feel really sober having read through some of these passages this morning. And so I wanted to come on here and process with you guys. The hour of darkness. That's what Jesus said at the Garden of Gethsemane, after he, had that whole incident of praying about his coming crucifixion. And, it talks about how he agonized in prayer, and how he sweat that were like great drops of blood as he agonized and prayed and said that he wanted his Father's will to be done more than his will in the natural, his fleshly will. And he had his three disciples that he brought close to pray with him, but they kept falling asleep. And but then it seems as though he's strengthened to move forward with what he has to do. But right before Judas comes with the guards to arrest him, he tells his disciples that this is the hour of darkness. And so, in reading about what happens to him once he's arrested, I was really struck by what the hour of darkness looks like. And I was also a little captivated by even the terminology, the hour of darkness. And, just trying to apply it to my reality today. I think about all the stories we write, and, the movies we do. And when we talk about darkness, sometimes it's darkness and it's something that's evil and something that you wouldn't want to be a part of. And sometimes it's darkness, it's something that's kind of cool, something that's kind of takes the limits off, a forbidden fruit type situation where, you know, could some of it be fun? Could some of it be thrilling? Thrilling is the word I'm thinking about. And I think in some cases, darkness and dark things and things that are not necessarily socially acceptable during the day are things we people tend to do at night. It's not touted as being evil, but as that there's some kind of goodness and some kind of thing that you want in the midst of that. And I feel like forbidden fruit, like what happened to Adam and Eve in the garden, specifically what happened to Eve, because it's, the story goes that Adam did it with his eyes wide open, but she was truly deceived. You know, it's that thought that God is trying to hold something from me that I might enjoy, that he knows might be good. He's trying to hold something from me that he has access to and he enjoys. But, there's a certain level of selfishness or pettiness coming from him to deny me this pleasure. And so I feel like we play with wanting to consider darkness and to see if it could be thrilling or something that we might enjoy. And at the very least, it seems cool. It seems free. It seems uninhibited, because a lot of times the laws and the rules and the expectations, sometimes I think we can feel bound and tied and denied because of them. And so I was really kind of blown away by the hour of darkness. I was really blown away by what actually happened to Jesus and how his trial actually went down. Conducted by people in his community, the religious leaders who claimed that their biggest problem with Jesus was that he was disrespecting God, that he was breaking the law. That was their biggest problem with him, and that he was dishonoring God, that he was making himself out to be God. Okay, which would imply that they love the law, they love order, they love justice, they love truth, they love righteousness. But then when you see what actually happens, how upside down everything actually is, how completely wrong what they do to Jesus is, it just shows what a level of depravity humanity can get to. And it just shows how much we really, 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 really need God. And Jesus himself, I feel like looking at them, he must have just seen how necessary what he was doing was. Because, and how truly we can't save ourselves. We truly can't save ourselves. We truly can't save ourselves. And as I was reading through the whole thing, one thing I kept thinking is, wow, you can be that close to the evidence. You can be that close to the truth, because I'm talking about Jesus was right in front of them, you know, and he's a celebrity in that time. Everybody knew who he was. Everybody knew what he had done. You can be that close to God's power and the evidence of who he is. And you can be that close to him. You can touch him yourself. You know what I'm saying? And still be completely blind to the truth of who he is and what condition you're really in. Because I'm looking at these people, they must have felt so powerful. They must have felt so vindicated. They must have felt so in control. But they were completely wrong. What their carnal senses were telling them about where they were in the situation, people like Pilate saying stuff to Jesus like, what, you're not talking to me? You're not answering my questions? You're not defending yourself? Don't you know I have the power to set you free? I'm in control here. You need to cow down to me. See, that's why I shouldn't use expressions I don't know. You need to be humbling yourself before me. I'm the person in the position of power. As far as his carnal senses are telling him, that's what reality is. But Jesus tells him what the real reality is. You don't have any power over me. You wouldn't be able to do any of this unless my Father in heaven had put you in this position, and it was part of the plan he's unfolding to offer a rescue to humanity. And none of this would be happening to me except I'm allowing it to happen to me. I'm the person in control here, you know? But as far as they knew, they were in control, okay? And they felt their control. Because the passage I'm going to read today is not the preceding passage to the crucifixion. I'm actually going to read what happens during the crucifixion, okay? But before the crucifixion, you know, we talked in the last live briefly about how it was like a travesty of a legal proceeding. They broke all of their laws, and they were willing to break it. They didn't care about breaking it. They just wanted what they wanted. They didn't care about the legalities. They didn't care about the truth. They didn't care about giving him due process. They just wanted him dead, okay? Because they recognized that going through the legal channels, they wouldn't be able to execute him because he wasn't guilty. He wasn't even guilty according to their laws. And they knew that, but they wanted him dead. So they didn't care about truth. Okay? And so they did everything illegally. They did everything illegally. They did the proceedings under the car in hiding, and they're not supposed to do that. They looked for witnesses to lie that they knew were lying. The whole point of a witness is you're going to tell the truth. They didn't care about that. You know what I'm saying? They even the way they found him, they took one of their disciples and they paid him off to betray him. Everything they did was evil. That's what darkness is like. That's what lawlessness is like. And I feel like it builds and it builds and it builds and it gets progressively worse. You know, they take him, they try to interrogate him. First, they try to interrogate him in secret, and they can't get out of him what they want to get out of him. Then they try to interrogate him publicly, and they try to get him to participate in it, but he refuses to participate in it. For the most part, he keeps his mouth shut. He doesn't deny who he is. He doesn't deny that he claims to be the Son of God. He doesn't deny their accusations that he's the King of the Jews. But other than that, he keeps his mouth shut. He gives no defense. He says, there's no reason for me to defend myself. Everything I've done publicly. Why aren't my followers, the people that sat here and listened to me, here to testify about what I said? You know, he challenged them to their face about how corrupt his proceedings were. But it just escalated. And you see, they start to break down. And I feel like that's what happens with lawlessness. They start to break down. When the professional behavior doesn't work, they start slapping him around. You know what I'm saying? They start slapping him around. They cursing him and tearing him down. And a lot of the things that happened were uncalled for. So they completely humiliated him during the trial. And you see this struggle going on where even though Pilate is known to be cruel, he's done this kind of corrupt thing many, many times before, where he sent somebody to death even though they were innocent. Like if you look at historical records about him, you can see why they would have been thrilled to take Jesus to him, because they knew it would have been him being innocent was not an issue. Okay, but we can see the God in this, in the sense that even Pilate was like, wait a minute, we shouldn't do this. We shouldn't do this. God even moved on the heart of his wife where she was having nightmares about it, where God was telling, she felt tormented over him doing it. And it was almost God's mercy to Pilate and to her. She even told her husband, don't have anything to do with this man, because I've been tormented all night about this man. It's almost like you don't want to be part of killing him. There's judgment coming against you for this. This is not just anybody you're gonna kill innocently. You know what I'm saying? And Pilate, you see him backing up and trying to get out of it. And I'm sure the rest of them must have been like, what are you doing? You do this all the time. What's the problem? Even that should have been a clue to them that, maybe we shouldn't go this far. So many things in the story for us to see that, they had every chance not to do this. Okay? But they move forward, and it's like they're beside themselves. And the thing with lawlessness and the hour of darkness is it's like a snowball effect, and we see the people getting progressively more and more and more out of control. And it's like I understand the hardening of the hearts now. It's like now they're not they have there's nothing that can pull them back from what they're intent on doing. Okay? And it's like a frenzy. And it's like they don't even know they're in the midst. The only, and it's funny because when I was reading it, what was coming to mind, or because imitate. I mean, they say art imitates life, and I was thinking about books that I've read, through the years, and even with the kids for homeschooling, books like Lord of the Flies, and how you start off being so civilized, and how certain hardships and circumstances and things that you get, that happen to you can reduce you to the state of a savage, you know and what lawlessness can do. You know what I'm saying? It's not something and I'm realizing it's super dangerous, and I understand why the temptation is always to bring us to a place of lawlessness where we don't all abide under one law, and there aren't strict consequences that would make us want to abide under one law, and why there's always a move and in a temptation in society for us to move towards a situation where people are able to do whatever they think is right in their own eyes. And it's never good, because this hour of darkness doesn't look good, because if it wasn't enough for how much they humiliated and mocked and wronged Jesus in the corrupt trial that happened, behind the scenes, the guards are taking Jesus and they're taking his clothes off, putting a royal clothes on him, and beating him up, ripping his beard, spitting on him, disrespecting him, saying stuff to him, making a crown out of the thorns. I mean, I've seen the thorns that were used for his crown. Just the thorns in my rose bush outside that I could barely manipulate without having some gloves on. You know what I'm saying? I couldn't imagine somebody making, some kind of crown out of that and putting that on my head, much less the spike-like thing that they used to put on his head, and digging that into his body, and how Pilate was hemming and hawing, trying to find a way to get them to just let him go, because I found nothing wrong with this man. You know what I'm saying? But they wouldn't, and him trying to placate them by starting the proceedings and hoping that they'll be satisfied. He has Jesus flogged. Okay? He has him beaten. And it's just like, whoever came up with that method of torture, this just horrible method where there's some kind of whip that has pieces, sharp things tied to the ends of it, and then it's hard. It would be painful enough just to hit you with a smooth whip, but then that thing catches your skin and it rips your back open. Oh, and they did that. They gave him, like, I think 39 lashes or some crazy amount of lashes. One lash would have been enough to devastate you. But he's guilty enough. He did something so bad that you need to completely brutalize him. They completely brutalized him and ripped his body open. And I'm thinking about the person whose job it was that did that over and over again, and how hard your heart has to be to continue to be able to do that job over and over again, to just completely mutilate somebody's body like that. Okay? But it was layer upon layer of torture that it was just pure torture, horrible torture what they did to him. First on an emotional level, a social level, then physically. It's like they turned his back into minced meat. And they say a lot of people died just from that. But he was in a very weakened condition. Think about all the blood he lost. Think about, how hard it would have been just to stay conscious. Think about all the noise, people yelling and throwing accusations and saying stuff about you. You know what I'm saying? Knowing who you are and what you've done for these people, you know? The only thing that could sustain him through it all must had to be love. Love is the only thing that's strong enough that could have sustained Jesus through everything that happened to him, you know? But I was just thinking about how depraved it was, how low. That extent of evil, to be able to tear somebody up like that. It's one thing, and I don't think anybody should be torn up like that. I mean, I can't even. But, you know, you could reason, okay, if you knew the person had done something truly evil and that was happening, you could almost reason your way through why this was happening. But it was an established fact. Like, you read over and over and over again the statement that he's innocent, and everybody knows he's innocent. But they just want to silence him forever in their mind. You know what I'm saying? And so kill him then. Just kill him. But this level of complete, like, I'm just going to crush you. I just want to crush you. You know what I'm saying? They just wanted to crush him. That's what darkness is. That's what darkness is. That's what happened to Jesus when the religious leaders were able to do what was right to them in their own eyes. And we shouldn't seek it. We shouldn't seek it. I feel like there's a safety for us operating under the law of God. We don't want to be lawless. Let's look at Luke chapter 23. You know, because I was thinking about that after they beat him like that and everything, and then then you want to put the cross beam, give him the cross beam to carry that's so heavy. And when you read about historically about crucifixion, they actually, had to walk. They took the longest route they could to where they were going to be crucified, with the soldiers yelling, what their crime is, what they had done to the people. It was an example. You don't want this to happen to you. This is what happened, and this is what we've done to this man. It was a way to keep the empire in line. You know what I'm saying? To keep them fearing the Romans and complying to what the Romans wanted them to do. So somebody would be yelling what your crime was, and then you'd be naked in a culture so that valued modesty, the Jewish culture, I mean. You'd be naked, walking, carrying that heavy crossbeam with your back ripped open like that, carrying it across holding it. You probably have to use your back to be able to lift that thing, and they gave it to Jesus, but he was so weak he couldn't do it. So they had to get some stranger coming into the city, Simon of Cyrene, to carry it for him. And we don't talk a lot about him, but could you imagine? It's a humiliating proceeding. And they pulled him into that humiliation. He probably wanted, did he want any parts of that? Like, while you're carrying it, you're like, are you guilty by association? Who wants to be part of that? Who wants to carry that? And then he had to look at Jesus and the condition he was in. None of it was pleasant. And I'm like, these people are doing these things and they're sleeping at night. But what struck me when I read this passage today is how casual it all is. If you think about it, how, it's all in a day's work. It all is. The single event, the most important event in history. You know what I'm saying? And how the eyewitnesses that were there had no idea what was really going on. Okay. And it convicted me. I feel like that's a reality that keeps happening over and over and over again. To be in the process of something very important and very significant, but not to have your senses honed to the extent where you're truly aware of what's going on, and you miss an opportunity. You know what I'm saying? So let me read the passage because I can go on and on. Matthew 23. Matthew 23, 33 to 43. No, not Matthew. Luke 23. Luke 23, 33 to 43. I don't think I'm going to read all of it, but let's see. It says, "And when they were come to the place which is called Calvary, there they crucified him. And the malefactors," which means criminals, "they crucified him and the malefactors, one on the right hand and the other on the left. Then said Jesus, Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do. And they parted his raiment and cast lots." And, I had to read this in all the accounts of the Gospels. And in some accounts, they go into detail about them casting lots for his clothes. Apparently, his clothes were valuable enough that the soldiers wanted his clothes. Okay. Even after it had been bloodied and everything. Okay. They wanted his clothes. And I just thought about how ludicrous that was. Okay. Because we know they took him in his ripped up self and they put him on that cross. And then they drove nails through his hands. And then I just had to think about his hands and his feet. They nailed him to the cross. Just what I had to just thinking about that on top of it, after brutalizing, after all of this, and you on that rough, splintery wooden beam thing, you're naked, the thing is rubbing up against your skin, even before they put you on the cross, anything that was on your body, if they pull it off, it's ripping off with the, oh God, you guys. And then they put the nails in his hands, and then they have to lift the thing up, and then everything's hurting, and then the weight is applied to the fresh wounds of the nails on the hands and the feet, and it's just excruciating. Who came up with this? That you would take a created being made in the image of God and completely demoralize and devastate their body like that? That's evil. That's complete evil, to want to torment and torture somebody like that. Do we even have the right to do that? And then it's a public spectacle that certain people, they enjoy it. It's like the arena. You know what I'm saying? It's like when you think about how low and how wicked that is. Jesus called this the hour of darkness. We should want no parts of that. I want no parts of that. I want no parts of how low we can go without law and order. I want no parts of that. So, when you're thinking about how bad that was and how terrible that was, to think that right there, right at the base of all of that, I'm thinking about all the smells and all of it, the blood, all of it, in the middle of all of that, at the bottom of his cross, you out here casting dice and fighting over who gets his clothes. That's such a casual transaction. You're conducting casual business. You know, this man's life means nothing to you. His suffering means nothing to you. The injustice of what's happening means nothing to you. All in a day's work to mock the Jews about somebody that is trying to be a king. And you look at the Jews as the low of the lows anyway. You're going to take out all your hatred and frustration toward the Jews on this king, which is essentially what they did, you know. And he's suffering like that, and you did all of that to him. And you're just going about your business, trying to figure out if you could have a new outfit. The juxtaposition of those two things side by side spoke volumes to me. This is why we need Jesus. This is why the Bible says people are, you're born sick. You're born with a sick condition. You're born a sinner. That this type of thing can come out of you when there's no law to hold you back. And you have God right there. And you've done a great wrong. But you're completely oblivious. They're completely oblivious. As far as they know, they're the ones in a position of power. Verse 15. And the people stood beholding, and the rulers also with them, deriding him, saying, He saved others, let him save himself, if he be the Christ, the chosen of God. And the soldiers also mocked him, coming to him, and offering him vinegar, and saying, If you be the king of the Jews, save yourself. And a subscription also was written over him in letters of Greek and Latin and Hebrew, so that if anybody could understand what it said. This is the king of the Jews. And one of the malefactors or criminals which were hanged railed at him, saying, If you be the Christ, save yourself and us. But the other answering rebuked him, saying, Do you not fear God, seeing you are in the same condemnation? And we indeed justly, for we receive the due reward of our deeds. But this man has done nothing amiss. Even the criminals hanging on the cross on either side of Jesus knew he was innocent. And it's like, I'm good with that. Like, it's like the message of the day, I'm good with that. He's innocent. All this evil stuff has happened to him. I'm good with that. It's okay. You know, but he's got the right perspective though. We deserve this. We know why we're here. He hasn't done anything wrong. This shouldn't be happening to him. Okay, so then he goes in verse 42, and he said to Jesus, Lord, remember me when you come into your kingdom. So when he says, remember me when you come into your kingdom, he is making Jesus Lord. He's saying, I know you're coming into your kingdom. I believe who you say you are. He's repenting. And Jesus accepts it. So if there's no greater example that is what's in your heart, what your heart is crying out to God, that communicates everything that needs to be communicated when you're giving your life to the Lord, and that there's no specific words that you have to speak for God to understand you. If nothing communicates that, this passage communicates that. Because in the statement that this man makes, he says, I know what I did was wrong. I know I deserve to die. But I'm transferring I want to transfer my allegiance to you, Jesus. Save me. And Jesus accepts him. Jesus accepts him. Okay? Verse 43. And Jesus said to him, verily I say to you, today you shall be with me in paradise. So another example, you know, what happens to you after you die. Because the dude is going to die today. He's being crucified. And Jesus says, today you will be with me in paradise. Absent from the body, present with the Lord. Okay? Verse 44. And it was about the 6th hour, and there was darkness over all the earth until the 9th hour. And the sun was darkened, and the veil of the temple was rent in the midst. And when Jesus had cried with a loud voice, he said, Father, into your hands I commend my spirit. And having said thus, he gave up the ghost. Okay? You know, this jumped out at me. Before I started studying that we are a spirit that has a soul, which houses your mind, your will, and your emotions. Okay? And we live in a body. Before I really started looking into this, you know, I would kind of read over these verses, but it's all over the Bible to explain to us who we are. His body is hanging on the cross, okay? But he releases his body. When he gave up the ghost, his spirit and his soul is separated from his body. That's what death is. When your spirit and your soul are separated from your body. Okay? And so, you know, these people that practice witchcraft, that practice separating your spirit from your body and things like that, I would not go near that with a 10-foot pole, because you are playing with a type of death. You are playing with a type of death. You know, and I feel like it's the devil toying with the idea that, well, you could take your spirit out and put your spirit back in, and take your spirit out and put your spirit back in. You know what I'm saying? But only that should be left up to God. Okay? And so you're playing with something that you really shouldn't be playing with. Okay? But that's what that means. And so when you become aware of that, of who you really are, and you read through scripture, you will see so many verses that talk about the spirit and the soul and the body and the relationship between the three. Okay? And so it says he gave up his ghost. And so I'll stop there. So again, you know, between the crowds, you know, who had I think about where they were. They had staked everything on Jesus. You know, they had been so excited when he came into Jerusalem. They welcomed him in like a king. They thought he was going to change all their, you know, their situation with the Romans and feed them, you know, because they wanted, when he fed the 5,000 like that, he can even feed us. He can even feed us. You know what I'm saying? They wanted to make him king. You know, they had seen his power. To see him allow all of this, to see him allow his body to be reduced to the condition that it was reduced to see him allow them to insult him and disrespect him publicly the way that they did, you know, I think for the people, it just looked like maybe he didn't have all that power. Maybe it was just a show. You know what I'm saying? Surely God, a God that they reverence so much in their culture that they were afraid to say his name out loud. And so they would take all the vowels out and things like that, you know, wouldn't allow himself to be disrespected in this way. They couldn't imagine God allowing people to brutalize him like that. You know what I'm saying? And because they had this belief and these assumptions and stuff, it took away the possibility that Jesus was who he said he was and could possibly be their Messiah anymore. Okay? Because they didn't understand his plan. They didn't understand that everything that happened in his body, you know, there's a verse that says he took our sicknesses upon his body on the cross. He took all our sicknesses upon ourselves and upon himself on the cross. And because of this, we are healed physically of our sicknesses, which is why when we're sick and we receive healing from the Father, it's already ours, because Jesus, he already said yes. He already said yes. Okay? Because Jesus already took it. He already did everything necessary for us to be healthy. You know what I'm saying? That's why he allowed all of that. But they didn't know all of that. You know what I'm saying? And when his blood was just dripping and dripping and dripping and dripping, it was the payment for our sins. You know. Now God has done his best to make his plan crystal clear. Because everything that he did, the temple, the sacrifices, if you go through and study it and read it through, and everything he set up for them to understand what it would take for their sins to be forgiven. Everything he had taught them about what results when you sin. Deuteronomy 20, those late chapters in Deuteronomy. What happens to you when we sin? In contrast, when you sin and choose to disobey me, in contrast to what happens to you when you live in obedience. We see that things like sickness, poverty, a lot of the breakdown of the earth, the planet, we only know to think about the fact that that's happening because we're abusing things on the planet without reading scripture and also fully appreciating the fact that sin has an effect on the planet. It has an effect on the land. It curses the land. You know what I'm saying? And how Jesus reversed it all. Okay? But first, God laid out the map of what it all means in the Old Testament with how he set up temple worship and all the symbolism and all the feasts and all that stuff. Everything points back to Jesus. Everything points back to him. Which is why, I really enjoyed in The Chosen when I saw the premiere of The Chosen this year. I really enjoyed that line where Jesus says, "I am the law of Moses." And there was some controversy about that because I think some people were saying that came out of Mormonism. But if you understand the symbolism and the foreshadowing of the Old Testament and how it all points back to Jesus, you will understand why he said that. He is the fulfillment of the law. Everything points back to him. Everything points back to him. If you have him, you have it all. You know what I'm saying? And so they didn't fully appreciate that in doing what he did, Jesus finally, once and for all, restored man's relationship with the Father. That's why he's called the second Adam. What the first Adam started, the second Adam finished it and brought it back to where it needed to be. You know what I'm saying? It's powerful when you put it all together, okay? But for me today, I just couldn't get past how low they went. I just couldn't get past how terrible it really is for people to do whatever is right in their own eyes and for God's truth not to be there to rein them back. It's almost like God was showing them that his justice is justice. Because when we do things your way, it's injustice all the way. There is no justice without God. So it's powerful, you guys. I mean, I said so much. I don't even know what I said. I said so much. You know, it just, it had a profound impact. And I think this is one of those stories that we share so much in the church, and it's been preached about so much, you know, that I think it can become so familiar that we can miss it, that we can miss, you know, some of the nuggets that are still there. And I'm sure God's going to just continue to show me more and more and more and more and more and more. And I'm excited for it. I'm excited for it. But we need God. The hour of darkness is nothing to play with, nothing to toy with. Evil is nothing to toy with. You know, it seems like you step into it, and at first it looks like you're in control, but then it's almost like you get swept away, and it takes you to a place where you never would have wanted to be. A very ugly place. A very ugly place. Wow. So that's all I have for you today, you guys. It's super early. I don't know who in the world would be with me live on this live this morning, but I see people are watching. You know, if you want to say hey in the chat, this is the time where I reserve to chat with people on the live. I do have some time, so I don't have to run off if you want to say hi in the chat this morning. But, you know, wow. As they say, I'm shook. My kids always tell me, no, don't use the slang, Bob. But I feel shook. I feel shook after reading this morning. I feel shook. You know, that's what's so wonderful about the Word of God. Having read that so many times, I can't believe how shook I'm shook. Every Sunday, people are doing messages on this stuff, and I'm still shook. And I'm so grateful for what the Lord has done, you guys. I'm so grateful. I'm so grateful for what the Lord has done. So I checked the chat one more time. I don't see anything. So I hope you guys will have a blessed day, and I will see you on the next live. Be blessed.